because really we really figured that there's a lot of pain in sending messages those days. Sending an SMS could take about 3-4 hours, especially like OTP would get impacted on some of these weekends and holidays and special days. We thought this is a big problem to solve, and we picked up that as a problem statement, and then build a quick go-to-market product that sort of got early customers and all of that. That happened in 2000, end of 2010 and 11. Um, and then once we got the early customers, we figured that it's important to focus on one aspect, and we started handing off all our service work for last 2 years. We started going back to all our customers, return their money. In fact, some of them we gave notice time, about a month and a half, to just to give away that, and we said we will only focus on this. So once we started focusing, one of the early markets was Bangalore, very tech savvy customers adopted to some of our technology very fast. We decided to scale up in multiple operations about Bombay, Delhi, Hyderabad, and scaled it up to across India over the next few years until 2014. Um, in 2014, there was a new wave of telephony system, everything on cloud based, and while everything was moving to cloud, we realized that it's important for us to also move some of our business to cloud. So telephony was one of the piece was never moved to cloud or always had a regulatory challenge, and we figured that we could do some of these things while the cost could be higher than the regular cost. But we said it's still a great value add for somebody who really believes in customer experience, customer end. Picked up that as a piece, built on top of voice solutioning, and then scaled that up across the vertical. And by 2017, we were like $35 million of revenue. At $35 million of revenue, we were we were figuring out what next to do. India was growing year on year to 20-30%. And we met an Italian company in Mobile World Congress, and that's where Italian company actually wanted to take this company to public. And they were doing about $50 million, $50 to $60 million. We were at about $35 million. And a decent company to go public should be at least about $100 million of revenue. It's a good to get a nice, decent valuation. So that both, I think we also wanted to take public, they also wanted to take it public. We combined as an entity. They acquired significant stake, which is like a majority stake in Pin Solution with me in 2017, and then ramped it up to a majority stake today, and then consolidated. And then in 2018, we became one organization because we had two different identity. We combined into one single identity called Kaleyra. And Kaleyra in 2018 was created, and then we started offering multi-stack channel across messaging, WhatsApp, voice, all of these services. Finally, we went public at New York Stock Exchange in about November last year, 2019, just about 8 months back, at a at a run rate of $130 million last year, and this year we will do about $150 million of revenue as a group. And India is one of the biggest contributor as well, which is about 40-45% today. So that's about Kaleyra, and that's my journey, and that's how. Otherwise, I've personally just spent a lot of time on investing in a couple of startups, mostly in the B2B space, trying to help them in terms of how do we scale, ramp up business around it. How do you sort of build sales engine and all of that. Primarily, my focus has been on sales, and my other co-founder Ashish was more on the tech side, and that's how we build business. Moving on, so I think I'm going to talk more on my experience and how to build a successful SaaS product. I think that's the topic was given, and I thought I should really share some real experiences that we went through, and how we sort of ramped up. And I'm going to talk from 2011 because that's where it all started. And some of you, I know that the audience is pretty early stage, mid stage organization. So you would want to know how, and I'm mostly going to talk more on product to sales engine plan, more on that front, which will give you nice insights on what you can do as an organization, right? So Shreya, all good, right? So far, so good.
Yes.
Yeah, great. So moving on, I think, so one of the early, We at Kalera, what we did is at very early in 2011, whenever we signed up customer, we literally did a lot of handholding in early, I would say early 50, 100 customers were like physically met, did multiple meetings, onboarded them, monitored, gave them constant report. One of the thing we did in the product was getting the right product market fit first was right, getting a basic product. We did not go on focusing on building like everything full-fledged product. The reason is we realized that we see one of the challenges of bootstrap is that you don't have a lot of money to invest in product building. So with whatever you have, with limited resources and limited money, you will actually build a basic product and get your early customers, start getting revenue. So product market fit, we got our early customers. We did just basic one or two important features we launched in the product and get those early customers signed up on our platform and started getting revenue. The other thing that we did, a very interesting thing was we did a lot of research about customers who are coming on our platform, who are these customers signing up, who are these customers using our service. Uh, Giving them more contextual, solving problems with more contextual, right? Giving them, so let's say some customers could, we would have a customer who wants to do a lot of OTP, who wants a lot of scale. There would be some customers who don't want scale but want to do a lot of transactional based messages. So I think there was a bit of a priority understanding of what really customer wants, and then optimizing, configuring those systems for that particular customer. And that's how I think customers also value actually sometimes what happens is that customer really wants the exact features rather than having a full-fledged features. So if you give, as long as you give them that go to easy to use features, they're happy. The other thing that we really did was our demos, sales demos. This is a very important topic, which in SaaS most of us really, we feel that everything is on the website. Our people should understand, but it's not that. That's not the case when it comes to customer, right? Customer really wants to have a physical conversation, interaction, or a online conversation, and more contextual to his organization, how he solve problem for his organization. I would actually at Kalera we used to do a lot of that bit of a training ourselves, where we used to actually put dummy data. In fact, I would always, whenever we go on a customer call, before that, do a lot of preliminary work on putting some demo data, put some data into the product, just to show that how cool is the product and what all it can do. Right? How can it save time? How can it add value to his whatever he's doing currently? That really gave us a breakthrough customer sign up. In fact, our sign up to conversion was pretty fast. We really we doubled down on that effort, almost, which used to take like 60 days. We brought it down to 30 days cycle kind of thing. One of the very interesting thing we did was we never focused on annual, ARR rather than monthly. We always got customers who would first use for a few months on our platform and then ramp it up to an annual sort of a recurring revenue, because that's very important. When you try to sell them a long-term package, they get really offended. They get really, they get really doubtful about, is it going to take my money and I'm not going to get value? And what we really focused was getting those early monthly recurring revenue kind of customers, MRR, and then eventually ramp them up, incentivize them to sign up for an annual ARR kind of a model. That's something was very early stage, very interesting piece that we did at Kalera. One of the, I would talk on primarily on the sales front and how to globally build is, so our inside sales was very, very strong. When I mean that strong, it means that we had I myself used to do personally inside sales and, making those calls, getting those leads, talking to customers, giving demos, onboarding them. And I built a parallel team, which eventually handed off to that team. What we realized one of the early stage was that you always need to have a huge pipeline of customers on your flow. So I always say that, if you want to close this month, let's say 10 customers, you should at least be talking to about 100 or 100 plus customers in a month. And that's where you will be able to at least close 10 customers in a month. So 1:10 ratio kind of a model, which is very important. And most of us, what happens is in the early stage, what happens, some customers are very promising. you will get carried away with the hope of they're getting closed, and you will not focus on other new acquisition. uh, you should consistently keep improving your funnel. You should keep building your funnel, because you will always have some customers backing out of some at some point in time. And that's why I keep saying, have 100 plus customers. At a very early stage, one of the things that we did was a we built what is relevant. I'll tell you, in 2014, Miss Call was very popular. Okay, so we had launched a very basic product called Miss Call, and got early customers. So from Miss Call service to pivoting into a IVR and receptionist services, and to a call masking service, was all added. All these features were added eventually. They were not there available for day one. We actually started with Miss Call as low cost as possible, getting those early customers, and they went through that entire experience, that hey, Miss Call really works, it's very effective. Once this was more effective, once this was more effective, we saw a great traction in pivoting from that to adding call masking and IVR and all those solutions, click to call and all of that. So that's where some of our customers pivoted and grew from a missed call, simple missed call. Uh, I would actually focus on one of the other thing that one of the other important point was packaging your product. If I'll tell you a simple, so we are not a pure SaaS play, but we are a hybrid of a SaaS play. I would say SaaS and platform as a service. So on telecom consumption, today, if I make 100 rupee as a revenue, let's say $1 as a revenue, 80% of that dollar goes to the operator, and then 20% is left as a margin. Um, and what we realized that, hey, you know what, this is a big problem. While the pure SaaS play, anybody who's building a SaaS company, their revenues would be the other way around, where 20% could be their cost and 80% could be their margin. So what we did is we started bundling some of exclusive features, which are pure SaaS features, with a on top of it our telecom feature. So we would actually get hybrid revenue. So we would get a pure SaaS revenue and a platform revenue as well. And that gave us a push about 40-60 kind of a revenue. So 40% was our gross margin, 60% was our cost. And I'll tell you what we did was, one of the early stages, we were one of the first one to launch an SMS based URL short link on the fly. So literally customer could come on our platform, dump their contact. Let's say you want to target your own customers, about 10,000 customers. You would come on the platform, dump it, and type your message, put a long URL. We would auto convert into a short URL with a link, and give you all the analytics on top of it, like which mobile numbers clicked on that link, with all of those details, with what is the handset he's using, whether he's an iOS user or an Android user, or which location. So some of these attributes, we were one of the early companies that built some of these things, and we were charging for some of these value add. And that's how we got a better margin than the otherwise, what happens, a pure platform play is a very competitive. So if you can bring if you some of you will have a more of a buying and selling, and more of a that's a product, so you can actually hybrid and mix your platform and your software into a bundle and offer it in a hybrid package. So this could was another great value add that happened at Kalera. um, uh, One of the on the I think I'm going to talk more on the customer focus journey. Very important was that customer. We kept our turnaround time very minimal at very early stage. I think at least when we from 0 to 1,000 customers, our turnaround time was very low. I would say, what was our turnaround time? If there's a customer issue, we would resolve. We would try and reach out to, or at least respond to them within the first 15 minutes, and try to solve within the first 45 minutes. This was a very interesting USP that really gave us a big success. Because a lot of customers started telling, no, your service response is better, and that's why I'm going to stay with you and continue to give you business. Because from other people, I don't get a good response. It takes a lot of time, and hence I will continue. So that was a great value add at Kalera when we did. The customer was extremely, our so I used to personally monitor the resolution time, turnaround time, those metrics, make ensuring that if a customer is reached out to us at this point, how do I sort of respond to him in within this time, ensuring that every day we used to like ensure that 95% of the metrics was matched. Then the other thing that we did was based on every month tickets that we used to get from our customers, we used to start productizing those. So let's pick up 5 important issues of uh, our product, which were always concerns were raised by the customer. We would actually pick up that and go back to solving those and automating those or productizing those. So it's another interesting thing. As you continue to build your say your growth, you should always have one sort of a developer or an engineer who works on only on customer focus, customer automation. So all those tickets, somebody who can analyze what are those tickets, what are those issues, and try to convert that into an automated system. So next time when the customer does, he can do it by himself. So some of these attributes really helped Kalera, to grow and become more and more sticky. We had a lot of sticky customers who did not leave us, and today also I can proudly tell you that 85% of our customers are recurring customers. Every year on year they continue to work with us, and every year our churn rate is very very I would say less than 5%, and um, and then we have we would every year add about 10 to 15% new customer, and eventually the customer would start with small capacity and then scale it up to a large capacity. um, uh, One topic on being customer focused is to always have a eventually when you build a larger team, divide those teams into two teams, ensure that you have a enterprise team as a separate entity and small medium early self-service sign up as a separate team, because both are very different customers, both needs a different kind of uh, experience and different kind of an attention. um, in enterprise, it's more lot more about negotiation, lot more about relationship building in a large enterprise. In a small enterprise, it's more about solving the basic problem, getting started, get going. Mm, price is not a big concern at that point in time. It's about getting value for money, and as long as that has been proven in your product, you just go and sign up those customers. But in an enterprise, yeah, it's harder your problem, because the enterprise will have 3 4 options, negotiations. So so have I think one sales guy cannot play a dual role. You will need a different focus. So you should always have a different so inside sales should be always different, and your enterprise sales should be always different. And if you come across an inside sales lead, and it's a large lead, you should hand it over ideally to an enterprise team that will sort of work it will give a very special attention and focus to sign up those customers. Um, uh, Coming back to your demos, and first topic was on demos. I think one of the thing you should guys, I mean, at Kalera we did that, right? We used to practice our own demos before even giving demo to a customer. I would keep everything ready: login, applications, messages. I would actually do, I would go 2 3 steps ahead. In fact, some of the times I would take customer numbers, save it in my application, so that I could just quickly, trigger an OTP, trigger a message to him, so that it feels like, super fast, clear, crisp demos really help to give a better edge than your other competition. uh, um, One other interesting point I want to say, that always we were lucky enough and we got that one first 10x developer. What do you mean by 10x? Who's like for us, a 10x developer has been like he's like a champion. He knows front end, back end, everything. He just you just need to tell him what is your requirement and he builds it in like quick 2 days, 3 days time frame. He just builds it for you and gives it to you. Every organization I think should have that one guy who can build, who can have that 10x kind of a developer who can build it. Sometimes I've seen that some founders are also like that kind of generally the founders are themselves. Even Ashish was like almost like a 10x developer. He would like quickly build something overnight and go make it live next day and tell customer to test it. So that was one point that you should always look out for, is get a good 10x kind of an engineer who can build things um, very fast and launch it for you to go to market. Uh, uh, the other thing that we did, you know, is that as in when we start scaling up, we realized that there's a lot of ecosystem applications that needs to be supporting your product. So we built a lot of these plugins. For example, we built a plugin for Salesforce. We built a plugin for Google Sheets. We did a plugin so people were using their traditional systems, and we try to disrupt customers. Moving from, so typically what used to happen is that you have a Google Sheet, you copy the contact from there and paste it on our platform. Now, what if I tell you that you don't have to do all of that? Just go to our Google Sheet, just install our plugin, and from there itself you can start sending. So we really looked out for those kind of features where we went where the customers were. So customers, we build effective plugins. I think you should always focus on building an ecosystem where you could build a plugin where customers are, and that gave us an extra business growth and boost. And we used to charge them on a SaaS platform plus uh, platform fees. Um so these are some topics. I'll just take a pause. If there's any questions you would like to ask, or should I just continue with more?
Yeah, yeah, Aniket, we can actually take a couple of questions.
Yeah, that would be great. Yeah.
Hari, can you
Uh,
take those questions?
yes, Shreya. So I'll start with the first question that we had.
Yeah.
So the first one, uh, how do you execute a startup idea, the ideation phases, and making it a company, and what should they focus to make the execution better? What is your advice for that?
Okay, so great execution. How do you start an idea? Okay, I will tell from my context and
Hmm.
how did we start, right? So I remember in college we were just we built a project, college management system, and with that college management system, we wanted to actually build a small GSM model. We connected and then start sending SMS to the parents. Typically, the management college management system will enable parents to send an reminder for fees payments, if the student is attending classes or not, and all of that. So that was the idea that we saw. That was the idea it came. Now, how that idea can be created. Now, I know that a lot of people. So that was the idea, but we did not focus on building that idea. We pivoted to like service. We did like websites and e-commerce stuff.
Hmm.
And then we realized that there was a big problem where SMS were getting delayed in 2011, in 2010 and 11. We saw that on special days, the delay could be like anywhere about 8 hours, 9 hours. And if you're sending an SMS today, you will get SMS tomorrow. So this really created, and see, this is how you pick up a problem. You see this as a problem, and you start looking at, is this a, a, pro- a problem that is, at least let's say, in one geography, is this a problem? If this is a problem in one geography, you pick up that as a problem statement, and then you start with that idea. Okay. Forming a company and all of that. See, other very important point here was that, don't always don't be in a mind frame that you want to start alone as a person. You should always have somebody where you could share your ideas and solve problems together. Always have like complementary skill set person, like a co-founder. I think I was lucky enough to get one co-founder, Ashish, where he was a techie, I was more on business guy. We had different skill sets, but very complementary skill sets. That helped us to uh, maybe I had like a 50% feeling of starting a company doing this, but Ashish was like fully convinced, let's do it. And that push gave us to start a company, and one of the, and it's very important to, be very, very clear at early stage. You don't think too much. People start thinking too much about, will it succeed? Will it fail? And all of that. Honestly, both of us we were like, we said, it doesn't matter if we fail, let's do it. Whatever happens, we'll figure it out later. So you don't overthink, you just think and you just start, and you get one good co-founder. I think these are some ideas, and then you pick up a problem, and that's how you sort of package it into a problem solving approach and build it for customers and get your early customers.
Yes. So I'll put one more question for now. And so the thing is, it's from Siddharth. Did you learn marketing skills while building SaaS product, or was it through your college? And how did you upskill yourself?
Okay, so interesting question. So college, I think we all know sometimes we all know that college educations are very very different from a real life experience. You have to upskill, and I think at marketing skills we most of the thing was through the learning journey. We did a lot of mistakes in our early stage of growth. In fact, we were just a lot of those went. A lot of those were like an experiment, I would say. I would not say as a mistake, but those were experiments. Some did, some worked, some didn't work. And then you look at, and then okay. So I'm a believer of. I don't go and read a lot of articles and do what are the best practices. I actually sometimes I do a real life implementation, and if it doesn't work, then I go back and look at some of these articles. What are the best practices to do, and then you sort of try to contextually fit into some of the best practices and some of your learning, and package it into and approach it and solve that. So upskill happened through that approach. Basically, a combination of doing some experiment didn't work, reading up a few things, figuring out what is the right way, putting things together, and then going back again. And that's how it happened. College, in college, I did not learn any of these marketing skills. And also, little bit of marketing, I mean, coming from a business background, little bit of marketing, what's happening, and you learn from that as well. So there was a combination of these two things.
Yes. So I think we'll carry on with the session. So and after that we have still 6-7 more questions that we've gathered, and there are
panel 5-10 minutes, and I will so always I think like I mentioned, building a metric data driven approach is always makes sense. Very important is that I think at an early stage, startups should start adopting to some free tools, SaaS tools. If you're building a product, make sure you have a decent CRM in place, or at least a decent Excel sheet, getting the right piece, putting together contextually. Also, once you have the CRM, ensuring that you do some bit of automation in terms of talking to the customer, right kind of follow up. One of the things that we used to do, I'll tell you, we used to get a lot of inbound calls, and then so we would act like a dual personality. So sometimes I'm like Aniket, and next time I would be some other name, and try to pitch with a different company, same product, and try to understand whether what is he up to, what is customer really thinking, to get some insights on. So we used to always have like 2 numbers, 2 email IDs, just to see what customer really looking for whenever we used to get those inquiries. That's something is very interesting that we did very early stage in 2010-11 days. Those days Truecaller and all of these were still not up there and available, so we could manage to get through all of this back then. The other thing is emphasize on, I think, build a great I think very important to have at a very early stage, have a good product manager who can really understand customer, who can get on a customer call, understand who can do customer interviews, get some feedback, look at you need a good, I would say, project/product manager both, who can also look at what is world up to, what is world doing in terms of what are the SaaS companies that are operating, what are the unique features, how can you position yourselves into a new offering. I think these are some early experiments that we did at Kalera, where we got product manager, making sure working with customers, also doing some bit of competition analysis, global analysis, and putting all this, combining and hybriding into one single solution. At Kalera, we did that very, very successfully. One of the other thing is, I would say, create some features that are so that could cost for a customer, make it freely available. in your early stage, you should always make, for example, I would say, don't restrict, like we in our product, we never restricted customers to create number of agents. So in our platform, if you look at, we don't have per agent login. What we decided was that we ensured that customer could use as many as agents. As long as their consumption is very high, we can give them a long list of agents which they can create. So sort of uh, your positioning in terms of product selling should also be based on what really customer wants and where customer is spending today. And you should make him realize that, look, you're spending about let's say x dollars, and you can save this x dollars to something else and move it to your more consumption model. So we did that very successfully. We didn't never had restrictions on agent access, and we created unlimited agent access. But we really charged a little bit of premium on our platform fee, where making a call would be a higher. The cost of making a call would be higher versus agent charge. Um, so those metrics really helped us in getting. In fact, we used to do this. We used to not restrict per account one number. We could actually, so in a cloud telephony, what happens is that every account will get one unique number. In fact, we were the early ones. We said no, you can have multiple numbers on your platform. So customer could run multiple workflow engines, workflow methodology. So somebody wants to, like we had banks who were working for a missed call for a checkbook delivery, could run an IVR for some banking transactions related query. Somebody who wants to request for a balance could give a different. So they would run like 4-5 missed calls, 3-4 IVR kind of systems on different workflows. And we did some of those. We did not restrict customer to use only a single number, but multi-number into one single. Um, the third element was a bit of a scale was very important. For us, always hard. Customers demanded scale at every point, and I think we took that very seriously. We were one of the early companies at Kaleyra, as Kaleyra as an early company built our complete, the whole telecom on cloud system, unlike any other traditional companies. We were the first one to use cloud systems, ensuring scalability, right? We had customers who could do like a 50K messages to 10 million messages in a day. So we had to ensure that we strike a balance between both where smaller customers don't get impacted because there's a big customer who's doing a 10 million campaign. So a scale was one of our primary. Obviously, from day one, there was a lot of demand for scale. We also learned the hard way of how to build a scalable model. We built the scalable model systems over the period of learning curve from customer feedback and all of that. Scale was one of the important aspect as part of the growing journey. And then, your APIs have to be really, 50% of our users today are API users. Consumption APIs are very important. We had I can tell you that what some of our customers really demanded, API callback should be less than, customer would say, I want less than 20 milliseconds or 50 milliseconds. In fact, in the last few years, we have benchmarked and reduced it to 5 milliseconds. So almost like a 5x, 6x kind of an improvement that we did. And these are some attributes you will realize that becomes a key point in decision making for customers that to work with you and start growing business. The more better millisecond response I give, my consumption on the platform would increase. If my milliseconds of response delayed, my consumption would drop. These are some nuances of a product building capability that, as part of a very early stage, we figured these aspects of fine tuning systems and ensuring that we give scalable, quick response, resolution, customer focus. These were some aspects that we really built on top of, as a product offering, and that's how, customers today working with us on multi-channel. Yeah, so let's open up for some questions. Hari?
So we have a popular question. So what are the best tactics and strategies to drive sales to reach out globally? Or was it SEO? Was it social marketing? And what was the main strategy that helped you?
Okay, so okay, so I'll go little. This will take a little more longer. What we should do is ideally pick up. I would ideally do a little bit of initially like a outbound calling system. So I would like first is get 2 or 3 folks. See, once you have a product and you know that, you should always identify yourself that which shape and size of customer will buy your product. It's very important. As long as you know which shape and size. So for example, let's say based on your product, you realize based on the overall feedback, you know that a customer, ideal customer for you is anywhere 10, size of a 10 company to a 50 organization. Okay. Who is the company with 10 to 50 people organization, which is a technology organization. Technology, when I mean that they have their own technology developer team, is let's say an ideal fit. Now, what you do is you give this as your metric and give your inside sales to start collecting information of companies like this size and shape, which is a technology company, which is a which is a 10 to 50 people organization. This is your ideal customer. Make a list. So let's say your list should be ideally in the range of thousands, because if you make 1,000, then only you will be able to reach out to those hundreds, and then from there you'll be able to convert those tens, right? So first you do an outbound methodology where you write an email, get an early stage response saying we solved the problem for you. We have this product that will exactly solve and help you to save time or save cost, whatever that is, right? And solve your complexity. So first methodology is to get those size and shape, get those 1,000 exhaustive lists, prepare that, start doing some onboard or get some early customers from that. Once you get that, then it's about, so now you have identified your ideal customer. Then you go to your digital marketing, where you do a lot of digital engagement in terms of, then you sort of put those filters in your digital campaign, and then you start focusing on inbound. But it's very important to have at a very early stage do a bit of an outbound process, because your first 100, 200, 500 customers should, at least 50% of them should come from your outbound process. And then, once your outbound process is like, looks clear and successful, then you completely shift yourself from an outbound to an inbound process. Then it's about making Google's SEOs and all that is all a value add, I feel.
Yes. So we have another question. So how is the inside sales different than enterprise sales process wise, and which one should be prioritized at what stage?
So early stage, you should always have an enterprise team. I would say get those early big customers. So priority. Okay, sorry. Let me correct it. So priority is to get your. You should always have your inside sales, obviously, because you will have customers signing up sometimes randomly, even if you don't do any marketing and all of that. You have your customer signing up, so that you need somebody to enable them demo and take them to sign up and convert those customers. Always have a small start, like hire 1 or 2 guys for your enterprise sales, where they so at what stage you should do that? Whenever you find the right customer for you, right customer, I would say right customer is basically based on but certain metrics. Let's say there are 5 metrics and you find those customers on those 5 metrics. You should be able to have an enterprise team who will now have a clear chart out that my enterprise sales is a very outbound driven, where your ticket size is much, it's like 10 times higher than your online service, right? So let's say if you're looking at a $10 from a customer who is a self-service, you should look at like maybe upward of $100 of a customer. So that kind of a differentiation should be there for enterprise. Enterprise is more of going out, talking to customer, meeting them, showing them demo, doing multiple rounds of conversation. Has a different caliber, where negotiation skills are very different, presentation skills are very different from an inside sales. Uh, these are some very, very different attributes, and you should have, at the very early stage, you should always have a sales guy. Once you early stage means once you're first year into the product, you've got the right product, you know that there's a market for this, and you know who are your customers. As a founder, then you should get a sales guy who starts because sometimes what happens is the enterprise sales guy will not have a very clear direction of what to do. that has to come from the founder saying, look, you know what, this is my product, I know these are my customers, these will sign up. And that's how we should have an enterprise sales team, which is a very different from an inside sales team. I hope I answered that, because I think we're getting a lot of questions. We should take more questions.
Yes, yes, we are, we have 6, 7 more questions right now and more coming on. So one more from, Prakhar of Foil. Prakhar is a co-founder of Foil. And so the question is, how did you grow? Was it channels that helped you grow? And how did you create that viral loops that gave you that chance to grow?
Huh. At, in Kalera, we had like we had 3 focus teams. So we call enterprise team. We had something called partner team, and we had something called MSME team. Uh, our we got at a very early stage, we got a lot of partner base. So partner means in our terms is that we appointed like a dealer, a distributor, or a agent who would take
Mhm.
services from us and then starts reselling in the market. So he would make some money, we would make some money. So that gave us an initial sort of a big jump in growth. Um, which created a bigger impact. And then we realized that, there's a as we started growing in that vertical, we also realized that it's important to work, because sometimes what happens is that these partners are very, very volatile. They would work with you for 6 months, then they would want to work with you. So have a partner ecosystem, then build a enterprise, parallel enterprise, and then we went on to those enterprise directly and onboard those customers. So that's how it created a more viral, and uh, it's it's really, I feel viral loops can be only created, at least at Kalera, was created through a lot of customers liking our product and referring, saying, you know what, I use Kalera, are you using Kalera, why are you using something else, this works seamlessly, I've used in my. So one of the like one developer team talking to another developer organization, that ecosystem, that word of mouth really helped make viral, creating a lot of those uh, awareness for us in building growth and creating that story.
Yes. So I'll go to the next question. So we have it in the slides. So do you have any level of coding experience, and the skills that helped build your product? How did your skills complement in building the product?
Interesting. Yeah. So in 2008 and 9, I personally did a bit of HTML, Visual Basic, and PHP myself. Coming from computer science background. Uh, I was not like fully, like I was maybe the weakest student of in technology terms, I would say. But Ashish was on the other side, was extremely, he did not even need any book. He would just code, and you just give him a problem and he would solve using a code and build a code around it. So it really helps, I would say, especially in a selling a tech product. When you're trying to sell a tech product, you really need to understand tech bit of a technology. And I think that is a good question, because I myself knew how technology works, and I would able to solve customer problems, solve customer queries in terms of technology. Or whenever there was a technical questions, I would actually take those questions. And one important, in sales guy, when you're building an inside sales, always try and hire people who are a bit of a technical, has done something on technology. That gives a better edge, because you don't need to get into too much of handholding and too much of training. Uh,
Mhm.
so I personally did that at Kalera. Because I knew, in fact, I used to design HTML web pages, so I know how technology works, how front end, back end, how database works. So you need to have a little bit of knowledge around it. Um, in the last few years in enterprise sales, we've done a lot of focus. Just to sort of growth, as part of growing, we did a lot of training to our sales team on APIs, how to use the APIs. We enabled some of our non technical guys to, we taught them how to use APIs and how to become more technically sound, how to, how to be more confident when you're giving a demo to the customer. So those things we did over the last few years to build a better confidence in our sales team.
Yes, yes. So I'll go to the next question. So while building your core team, which function should we focus on first?
Yeah, I think I clearly believe what I've seen is technology is a forefront. Technology is the forefront backbone of any company. When at least when we build the technology, I think. See, for me, I could only sell what I see. It was very hard for me to give like a dreamy, rosy picture to customers saying I have this, but when I go back, I have nothing ready, right? Um, or at least I have seen that I saw something that was doing magic. I felt like, oh, this is great product. I think there could be a lot of customers paying for it, and I believe that technology is a very very important aspect. Somebody who can you don't need like a somebody who's like an all-rounder, right? Like a
Mhm.
10x kind of a guy who you should have that guy, because you obviously you can't hire product manager, UI, front end design, all of them from day one. You should have one guy who can do a bit of everything, but but does not build a very fancy looking product, but even a basic product, getting that basic product out so that you can start getting your customers. I would put all my bet on technology, tech guy.
Yes, yes. So another question. So here it focuses on the early stage decision making. Mainly, where should the decision making happen, and how to decide on the sales and the product leadership team.
uh, So for so decisions, I think we will in our experience, one of the decisions where there's so we were like a platform play, right? And we realized that getting connected to operator is a big game, can be a big game changer. We saw great value, but obviously when you want to make those hard big decisions, it comes with a cost. It comes with those extra around baggage around it. I remember we had to do a few lakhs of upfront investment to get that scale.
Mhm.
So those are some decisions that can make or break the organization. Okay.
Mhm.
um, that is one. These So sometimes it's more commercial investments in taking those, because with commercial investments you get access to better systems, better opportunity and better market. So you go ahead and do that. But let's say the second decision making is to look, we were only a messaging company. I could have sticked around and just said messaging, I will only focus on messaging. But what happened? We had got a significant growth, about 25-30 million dollars of revenue from messaging business.
Mhm.
And customers kept on coming back saying, do you have missed call service? So we immediately, pivoted up, not pivoted, we sort of added more value. We created a new product. So these are some hard decisions. So what happens is that when you're doing so much in messaging, the organization founding team or a core team will always tell, don't uh, they will tell that there's a demand for customer who's asking for missed call service. And also, I mean, we went through a real experience, right? So we were on messaging, we had a great uh, sometimes we used to have customer issues, platform issues and all of that. What we did is, some of the teams we diverted from this to build a messaging. Obviously we didn't have money, so we had to remove some people from there. And these are some very very you puts you in a very tough spot to take what call should you take. But thankfully those decisions those decisions will either make or break again, in terms of how do you today if you today we generate 25% of our business from our voice, and 75% of our business comes from messaging. At one point 100% of our business was coming from messaging. But if
Mhm.
had we not taken that decision today, we would have a lot more been dependent on messaging, and it's getting more and more competitive. The reason we got into voice was there's a great value add. So how do you make those decisions? Purely data driven, with data, with what metrics, like what is the value add for customer. For us, we thought if I offer multi-channel service to one customer, the customer stickiness will remain intact. We will not lose customer, because customer will also get more deeper and deeper into our integration, and it will be
Mhm.
very hard for customer to disrupt us.
Okay.
Okay. So that's how I think those are some decisions that you need to you go through those experience and you take those decisions, I think. Yeah.
Yes, yes. Good. We have another question. So
Right.
this is from Deepak, Idea String Capital. So the journey from 1 million to 10 million in revenue, what shift you had to make to, make this happen?
1 second, guys. 1 second.
Yes, yes, yes.
Yeah. So I think from a 1 million to 10 million, right? At very early stage, I think we really expanded our sales team. I would say we went all out in terms of getting into multiple markets. I remember that once uh, we were at 1 million revenue primarily from Bangalore, and then we thought, if Bangalore itself is giving us $1 million revenue, why not go to Bombay, start selling? Most of, because 95% of our customers were from Bangalore. Our play was enterprise play, purely because there were a lot of big banks and fintech companies and all of that and you can't sell them on a purely a self-service model. So you had to go where the customers are. So we decided to hire a few folks, work from home kind of back then in 2011, 12, because we didn't have money to invest in an office space. So we hired good sales guy, but who has great skills of picking up a phone and making those calls to a customer and pitching cold calls to these large fintech companies, loyalty management companies, and all of those kind of large companies. That's where we got a big booster, I would say, from 1 million to a 10 million dollars of kind of a growth, uh, which really disrupted. And then we really saw, that when that 10 million we saw that is happening, then the dreams became bigger. And then we said, okay, we could do 30 million, and we could do 35 and 40 million, because the market was so big. So when you get from that 1 million to 10 million, and from 10 we took it to 30 million, we decided to we started in Middle East. We started our operations in Middle East, where we had like a sales rep who could meet those. Again, there we have a lot of retail is a big market there, right? So we enabled the retail market. We went after large retail customers. So we have as a company, we have a hybrid model where we have an enterprise vertical and then we have a self-service vertical. Self-service vertical converts into an SMA team. SMA teams are more centrally managed, where we don't meet the customer, most on a video call, and everything is on an interaction level, and everything is done online. But with an enterprise, it's more of an account. Then it's with an account with an enterprise, we have two verticals again, which is called new business and account management. Account management is more about um, managing customers so that you don't lose any of these large customers, where your retention rate should be 100%. So each account manager would have about 40-50 large customers. His role is very clear. He needs to increase the revenue from existing revenue to grow every month by 10 or 15%, so that a run rate of 5 to 15% rather, and make sure that customer have multi-channel. So we sell messaging, voice, everything, and ensure a great relationship and multiple point of contacts in the organization, because a lot of them, we realize that having one point of contact really, because people shift jobs and you lose the contact and rapport. So build that. And new business was focusing on primarily getting after new customers, and these are all large customers. They take like 6 months to onboard. The focus is to get those large customers. And then if a new business bumps into a smaller customer, he would easily go and sign up on the platform. There's a self-service for you. You will be served by somebody in a self-service model.
Continuing this, to the same lines, going from 1 million, 10 million, or 30. So the key was diversifying your sales team, going local.
Yeah.
And what along the same lines of decision, did you decide to hire, people who are actually, for example, let's take US, or you're going to a North American market. Did you hire local salespeople there, or did you hire, people in India selling out there, or what was it? Did you go actually hyper local, or did you do a hybrid model there?
So we did a different concept. In India, we had about 30 people in sales, and some of them were very good, right? And some of us, I'll tell you that, from a people management, right? Somebody who joined us as business development executive today is like a VP sales, managing like 20 people in the organization today. So we've given, basically what we've done is that we have grown that person in our organization itself to become that person through the journey. Very few people we have hired for sales. So mostly we have hired like a early stage, guys who are very into about sales and freshers. Um, in the last couple of years, what we've done is that the strategy that we've followed is that a couple of our guys who've spent more than 5 years in the organization, we give them an opportunity to go. For example, we sent one person from India to Middle East to go and shift his base to Middle East, and we hired. So this guy goes because he knows the culture, DNA, what works, what to be sold. He knows everything. This person who's worked with us for 5 years, we give him a bigger opportunity to move to a different location, and then we also hire a local guy. So it's mix of both local and a hybrid model, I would say, and always have like one or two people from your route where you're building your organization, and give opportunity. And this was a really plus point. I know that at least 5 of our people in the organization have moved. In fact, from one city to other, permanently they've shifted because of the growth and the opportunity in this guy. I've seen some of our sales guys who have their entire family base set up, everything, have their own house, but still moved to a different city because of the growth and opportunity and the larger role. So give opportunity to people within your who are performing, who are doing a star performers. Give them opportunity so that they can get a different experience of a global exposure, and also hire a local guy who can work with that guy, and that becomes a more blended. And otherwise, what happens is that if you have just a local guy in that market, it's very hard to talk, sell. You should always have somebody who's done some bit of an experience who's there.
Yes. So the next question is on product roadmap. So how do you basically design your roadmap? Is it based on customer ask, or is it based on designs that you already have from a company? And what is the weightage? Because it should be a mix of both, but what weightage do you give for each?
So it depends on a very I would say at what stage you're at what stage, and what at what power are you, and what side of your growth are you at. From between $1 to $10 million of revenue, we were like, I would say 80% customer, 20% product management, internal product roadmap and all of that, our internal product goals and all of that. 80% of the feedback or customer features demand used to come from customers. The reason is because we did not have sophisticated features. We did not have exhaustive features. We only had like 4 or 5 things. And whatever that 4 or 5 things were built again based on experience, customer feedback and all of that. And then once you become a $10 million revenue, then you try to productize everything. Then you look at, because then you can't build a specific thing for customer, because you want to have a standard uniformity and ensure that whatever you build can be offered to all the customers. And then we realized from a $10 million journey to a $30 million journey, we realized that we would have like 5 or 6 customers asking for similar stuff. So that then it became more of a 50-50 ratio, where we have our own product goals and roadmap, and then you have your customer product ask, and then you sort of bridge between 50-50, and then in that also you prioritize how many customers, what kind of revenue they will give. So you don't take those irrational decisions saying just one customer, small customer. So we would actually go into a lot of conversations with customer. Why are you asking? Why do you need? What will happen if I give you this feature, and what is the growth? What is the revenue I'm going to get? So I think these are some very basic, relatable questions that you ask to decide your product roadmap. So you can't have a very hard documented product roadmap that you will follow everything to the dot, which is very obviously, which is not a good sign. But we would always be open to take customer for example, we did a lot of great, we had Amazon, we did a lot of Amazon, we do their Amazon.in, we do their cloud communication. So typically a delivery boy and agent talking to delivery boy and customer, when they're having a conversation about the delivery of the product, they're talking on a cloud system. We did not have a standard, we did not have a vanilla, Amazon could not use the vanilla product. So we had to do something else for them. Given the fact that Amazon growth scale, we had to shift things. We had to deprioritize what we were thinking, and we had to prioritize what Amazon wanted. So those are some decisions that we took as an organization. So it's a mix of a lot of combinations. Getting those data metrics from customers will be very helpful. So somebody who give us like a, if it's $1 million order, I would actually move everything and change my product roadmap to get those customers.
Mhm.
Because it's our organization is more of sales, hungry for growth, business, and that kind of direction. So
Yes, yes. So, and the next question, what's your take on no-code platforms right now with the huge hype and everything in tools like Bubble, Zoho Creator, and everything? So, what is your take on those no-code platforms?
I think it's no-code platforms are quite interesting. Actually, I would say are good for a very early stage. If you want to start, if you anywhere from you want to build from zero to $1 million to $2 million organization. I think I think if you can get your MVP and get your product on a no-code using no-code, it's a good start, I would say. I mean, we at Kalera did not have, I mean, in 2009-10, there was nothing like those products available. But I think these are some good, interesting concepts that are coming up in India, and Creator, and all of these are very interesting to build something on top of it. So I would bet my early, but you have to be very clear. This will be, you will only use these for your early stage and not for your growth, because eventually when at growth stage, your customer ask will be very different. You cannot rely on a no code platform, because I'm sure they would be. I've never used it no code, but I've heard about it. They could be a lot of challenging. So Kalera story was always build things internally, build everything internally. Whatever it is, we would actually build everything uh, in the organization, rather than, we never outsourced or or used any third party no code platforms but but when companies are starting at early stage, you could use that.
Yes, yes. Uh, so we have the next question on building your inside sales team, initial sales. What is your interview process, and how do you find and learn what are who the good salespeople are?
Okay. So I think very clear, right? I think very clearly how are they very decent communication skills. They like to talk to a lot of people, not shying. They usually always look at somebody who's an extrovert, likes to go talk, on the pick up a phone call. I think those are some measures. We give them some real test cases, like, why don't you? In fact, one of the we did at Kalera was that, we would tell, hey, I would actually prepare 5 list of customers. I actually give them a drill where I would tell them to, give them some notes before coming for the interview. And when they come
Mhm.
at the interview, actually give them a couple of customers and tell, why don't you pitch them SMS service live. Actually, they could call saying, I'm calling from Kalera, and we offer messaging service, just to gauge how how intuitive, how innovative they are in that whatever little time that they get. And if they are very creative and intuitive, I think they could be a right fit. And then little bit of, you look at their experience, if they've done something. So if you're hiring a fresher, I would do more of a live mock drills. If you're a experienced, I would do a little more tactfully handle interviews, where I would ask, what are the questions, how do you measure your bucket. So you would ask him a simple question, to close one order, how many number of calls you'll make. So he will tell you, I can do in 5 calls, which is the wrong metrics. He will actually tell, I'm not sure, but I have to keep the funnel more fatter, to make sure that I get a lot of output conversion. So those are some metrics that you need to build from an inside sales when you're hiring an inside sales guy.
Mhm. Yes. So the next question, I love this question. So, currently, since your company has grown to this level and you're a sales guy, you can't track the details of every sale or every metric there. So, what would be the top 5 sales metric that you usually track?
Mm, we track. One is I actually do a week on week sales. So what I do is, one tracking metrics is that how much is the consumption. So our consumption is in billions, right? Today we process
Mhm.
like 3 billion messages a month. So what I do is every week I do a weekly. So earlier we used to do like a monthly, and then we short it down to weekly. So weekly, every first week. So let's say if it's August first week, what is my consumption? So let's say if it's a 500 million consumption, I would actually first metric is to compare with last month. So last month first week, what was the consumption? So if the consumption has to be almost like matching or a little bit of growth positive. So if it's anywhere between +5 and -5, it's okay because there could be 1 or 2 days of seasonality and all of that. The other metric that we would do is how many customer sign-ins we have. So last month by first 1 week, how many customers we had versus how many customers we have now. The other is the revenue, how much revenue we have accrued, whether we have not invoiced the customer, but tentatively I know that this is my invoice. The fourth metric is the collection, how much money we have collected, which is very important. So in business, our business fundamentally works on a lot of payments that we need to receive from our customers. So we give them, sometimes we give them some, 30% of our customers are prepaid, while 70% of our customers are postpaid. So 70% of the customers, we have to get our payments within 30 days. So that collection metrics. And then another metric is who are the top 5 customers from this month to last month. So that could change because I can tell you that because of the COVID impact, we saw a lot of health tech companies, their business, they started sending a lot of messages versus a whole cab service, on demand cab service, their messages consumption went down. So top 5 from last month to this month could be a good indicator for which kind of sector is working for you, which kind of sector is not working for you. So these are 4-5 indicators that you typically, at least at Kaleyra, we measure.
Yes, yes. So the next question, what is the current, engineering execution challenges that you have, especially as you're growing to this level, you need to support diverse customer needs across the globe and still be a SaaS product at the end of the day. And what is your major challenges?
Very real-time challenge that we are going through right now is that I would let me put it give you a simple example. So we built this car in 2000. Let's say we revamped our car. We launched a new version of a Kaleyra platform, and I would relate it to car because once you launch a brand new car, that happened in 2014-15. We launched it, and what happened is it becomes so huge and so complicated now. We've done so much on top of customization and so much of cross connections within the product itself today. We have no clue if anything, or we either have very limited knowledge of what could break, right? And we are transitioning to build a completely a brand new cloud communication product, and it's it's a very challenging phase where you don't know where should you put all your money. So today, what happened is that we have like 30 people managing our legacy platform, and we have hired another new 30 people to build on top. And then we are thinking that we will all migrate these customers from this to this platform. So it's like an upgrade that we want to do, and it's becoming challenging. And I think every organization will go through this. Once you have a large customer, you will feel your architecture, your framework is not very outdated, and you need to, if you want to do those core framework and architecture changes, you need to build a separate parallel engine, which all of what your legacy offers, plus let's say another 30% better features than what your legacy is, and then migrate those customers. So there are some challenging times that we are going through, but it's interesting. We are learning, and we are. It's taken a while. It's almost taken. So I can tell you that proudly, what we built back in 2014 was like we built it like in few weeks. Today it takes like few months now to build the same thing, because there's a product management, then there's the engineering manager, then that engineering is like then there's these sprint plans, and it sort of sometimes delays the process, but in the long term, I know that it will be a great value, and those things. So I think we're going through that interesting shift from a legacy to a new age platform.
Yes, yes. So next isn't building a sales pipeline. Does it require changes with respect to different global markets, and how do you take it? ANZ, APAC, EU. Do you have separate sales process there that caters to the specific needs, or is it like a standard process across the company?
It is a separate. For example, at least in APAC, it's a very similar approach. It's similar markets. Europe is a slightly more. Europe is a very different market. It's a little bit. It's very slow market. It's not. And I would say India, APAC is a very different breed altogether. The kind of companies that are emerging, right? Like every second there's a startup. Unlike in Europe, you don't find every second there's a startup there. It's very different dynamic markets. The US is a very different market again. Very few in US, if you look at your approach is very different because there's a lot they're like the bandwagon is like they're like big, and then there's nobody in like middle, and then there are these bottom companies. So very technology savvy or non-technology savvy, and then there's a big vacuum. In APAC is like it's all over the place. Like everybody's starting. There are repeated products, same products available, like 4-5 options. You have like more options. Europe, you don't have those options. Typically, Europe is a big consumption, uses primarily from US market or consumes a lot of these from APAC market, and therefore we have a very different DNA team. But I would not. The team is like for Europe would be a very different versus the US, and for APAC is a very different. Middle East APAC is all very similar. We have a similar team, similar standard process, but for Europe it could be a different process.
Yes. I have a question. So was Kaleyra totally bootstrapped before it went, public?
Yeah. So from 2000, I'll tell you, I put in about 4 lakh rupees, which is like $8,000. I don't know, 8,000.
Yeah, back then it would have been 8,000. Now it's different.
So $8,000 or $6,000, whatever. So in 2009, we never raised money. We never raised even a loan. We were completely loan-free, debt-free until 2017. And then in 2017, Ubiquity acquired Kaleyra. So it became, it was a bootstrap. So we had no loans, nothing. So, and then finally we went public, unpublic also, because we were profitable, and whatever profit we made, we ensured that we put in growth and development, and that's how. So it is a bootstrap, I would say. Even the Italy company which collaborated with us was also a bootstrap and never raised money. So
what edge do you think this gave you over, well-funded startups? Because one thing is we have seen is when it comes to well-funded startup, they need to go hyper growth, and even before they have systems in place, they need to start selling, and that puts them in a very difficult position. It gives them a less, option of risk. And what advantages do you have over these companies?
So I personally believe that in a bootstrap company, time to experiment, time to fail, opportunity to work with customers is a lot more easier, lot more interesting. I would say you could really learn what is breaking. You would really, but when you're in a hyper growth mode in a startup where you've got money, where you're focusing on customer acquisition, it's all about customer acquisition. But on a bootstrap company, the focus is more on getting profitability. I would actually, whenever I'm onboarding a customer, I actually see whether he's giving me a right gross margin. Will make a decent gross margin. If I don't make a decent gross margin, I don't. So those are and then you learn whether you want. So you would actually prioritize saying, hey, I can have top 10 customers who can give me less margin, and then I have 100 customers who will give me high gross margin. So blend of that would still be at about 20-25% is a decent gross margin to operate, for example. Versus a high growth where you are not focusing on margins, you just focus on getting those, and you sometimes go wrong because you get you get customers who are not even relevant to the product, and all of that, and they could just churn out. But here your churn and all that is a very detailed flow. You will not really I would say all the nuances in the journey when you're building bootstrap is a very different experience. It's a slow, it's organic, it's easy. You learn from your mistakes, you experiment few things, you change. But you bootstrap, you're in a funded, you're always answerable and you're more focused on growth. So there are primary differences there, and that I could feel. In Kaleyra, we could do those experiments very freely. We could learn from our mistakes. We get feedback from our sales team. We get feedback from our employees. Customers will give feedback. We would say, okay, let me improve this. the opportunity was there, but in a growth hyper growth, you're all over the place, and you will spend millions and billions on multiple things, and one thing would click, and so that's how it is. It's like more of spray and pray, but here you can't afford to do that spray and pray.
Mm-hmm. And what's your idea to early stage founders right now in 2020? Is it better to keep your company bootstrapped or take funding?
Yeah.
Your perspective, I mean,
Yeah.
let's.
Um, so you know what? Don't don't force yourself to. Don't be under pressure that you have to raise money. I think a lot of what I've seen is the founders today start solving a problem purely looking at, oh, there's so much money available, I will go for funding. First, don't solve. Focus on your core principles of business model. If your business model is worthy, okay, try to build. I would always tell founders to put in your own money and own passion into the first few years, and then go for
Mhm.
your funding. Go for your funding. It's not a bad thing. Your funding gives you a different learning experience, and we should all go through that experience as well. But when you're early stage building block, your focus should be, don't think that this is the idea, this is the problem, and I'm going to solve this problem, and first thing is I need to raise money. Don't think like that. Think of first building it, go to customer, put in your own money, and then once you get that good traction, then you go for a fundraising growth. Then for the growth you could do, because I know that there could be many challenges. A lot of people will not have money, or there could be financial challenges. Funding is the only option. We could do that. Don't disconnect yourself from not raising money, but raise money.
Mhm. Yes. And so generally, so there's a question, Pratiksha. I think it's a broader question. So generally, how long does it take to get the first client? And your idea for companies, maybe in an SMB or mid-market or enterprise segment, how to get the first customer and where to get them?
First customers are always, I would uh, I would actually, build, through your early, connects. You should always, with your close connects, it could be LinkedIn, it could be your early digital connects that you have. Always get your first 10, 20 customers through that. Uh,
Mhm.
and, find your target market, find your target customer, and then do a bit of a cold calling and get those early customers. As a founder, you only have to sell yourself, because then product, how your product is, and you have to really go out and talk to some potential companies to buy your product, and you will have to do that. So you should get your first early customers by yourself and through your close network. I think these are the very easy steps to go after that market.
Yes, great. Yes, and that's all the questions that we have right now. We've gone around, 20 questions today
Yeah.
altogether. And thank you so much, Aniket.
Thank you, man. Thank
And
you.
Kalyara has been always a great journey that I followed, because I'm a guy who stands together on bootstrapping.
Yeah.
And no, there's not much success story behind bootstrapping companies going to this scale.
Yes. Yeah, I agree. I know there are few companies, but yeah, very limited. And
Yeah, it's very limited. Yeah.
it's unfortunate that a lot of journalists only cover mostly with somebody who's raised money. That's more exciting story than somebody who's bootstrapping, right? So
Mhm.
I know how I can feel the pain. I've seen that through the long term. And that's why you've seen we have not been doing a lot of marketing. We were not there out. We were mostly very internally focused. Never invested a lot of money in marketing. We did a very we were very at it at customers. We always looked out for customers. So any startup that would raise money, we would actually go and make a call to them and say, why don't you buy our service, rather than doing anything else. So that was our focus.
Yes, yes. So, I'll not take any more of your time. As I promised, I'm finishing it off in 90 minutes for you.
Yeah.
And so please give me your, closing lines. What would you say for the SaaS community? And
So I think thank you so much, Hari, and thank you, Shreya, for all the time and the closing. I think customer focus, keep build some unique features that can add, some 10x growth to your build features that are more valuable to customers. Um, Ensure that you are at customer forefront, and think of building business in a bootstrap. Put in your money, put in your capital if possible. That'll give you a better experience of how difficult business is to pick up a problem and solve that problem. I think these are some 4-5 attributes. I would say it's very hard to, because 90 minutes is very hard to for me to. But yeah, these are some attributes I think we should really focus on. And it's great. I mean, the kind of questions that I've got today, it's really great, interesting to so much insights that I've got from people. Really nice to get those questions.
Thank you, Aniket, and thank you so much for your time.
Thanks.
And all participants, we'll be sharing the recording of the session. Maybe in a few days, we'll go through the edits and then send it to you. Please watch forward for the email on that, and you can share it with anybody you know, and we'll also give you the transcript. Thank you.
Thank you so much, guys. Thank you. See you, everyone. Bye. Bye, Shreya. Thanks.
Bye. See you.
Bye.